one of the most advanced long-range, high-altitude payload-carrying bombers of World War II. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress. By 1940, the world, including the U.S., was coming out of the worst depression it had ever experienced, known as the Great Depression. Adolf Hitler was flexing his military might in Europe with the invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, the fall of Dunkirk by June of 1940, and continental Europe under Hitler's control. If England was invaded by Hitler, the U.S. would have no long-range bomber to reach Europe. On January 29, 1940, the War Department, U.S. Army Corps, Wright Field, Ohio, releases a request for a long-range bomber, a bomber with a much longer range than either the B-17 or B-24. This request reaches the desk of Phil Johnson, president of Boeing Aircraft Company, on February 5th, and by June, Boeing approves and designates it initially as the Model 345, with a mock-up completed by the end of that year, followed by 2 test aircraft known as the XB-29 being ordered. By May of 1941, the Army had ordered 250 aircraft, though no aircraft parts had been manufactured. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese led a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, killing thousands. On December 8th, America declared war on Japan. Several days later, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. The U.S. responded with a declaration of war against Germany and Italy. World War II had begun. On September 21, 1942, the XB-29 made its first flight at Boeing Field in Seattle. 1,650 were ordered by then. The B-29 featured the high-speed Boeing airfoil, and its larger Fowler flaps added to the wing area, which increased lift. The B-29 had a wingspan of 141 feet 3 inches, height 27 feet 9 inches. Its length was 99 feet. Gross weight was 105,000 pounds. Its top speed was 365 miles per hour and cruised at 220 miles per hour. Its range was 5,830 miles. Service ceiling was 31,850 feet. The B-29 was powered by 4 2,200 horsepower Wright 3350 double cyclone 18-cylinder radial engines, the most powerful at that time. The B-29 had a crew of 11 and was the first military aircraft to have a pressurized cabin. The fuselage was designed as a cylinder to handle the pressurization. This allowed for long-distance missions, providing crew comfort at high altitudes. The B-29 had a central fire control system that included 4 remotely controlled gun turrets, each armed with 50 caliber machine guns and 1 20-millimeter cannon. The guns were aimed electronically from the nose, tail, and mid-fuselage. The gun system also used analog computers to help operators aim, compensating for airspeed, gravity, temperature, and humidity. Boeing built a total of 2,766. Boeing Wichita was the clear leader, building 1,644 and 1,122 in Renton, Washington. The Bell Aircraft Company built 668 in Georgia. The Glenn L. Martin Company in Omaha, Nebraska built 536 for a total production of 3,970.
Started Stearman when there's, I think, 55 employees. When they decided to start working on B-29, they moved us to Plant 2, which was just built. I worked on designing the skin, the ribs, and that type of stuff.
This very advanced aircraft was plagued with a number of problems, most notably the engines. However, no major alterations of the airframe were required throughout its production history. The engines were prone to swallowing valves, reaching high temperatures, and uncontrollable fires. The second prototype flew in December 1942, but crashes on February 16, 1943, killing all the crew and 18 on the ground. The first production B-29s began to roll off the Wichita assembly line in September 1943, with full production by the end of the year. By the end of mid-January 1944, 97 had been built, but only 16 were flyable. A Battle of Kansas took place during March and April of 1944. An intensive effort took place to get the first B-29s ready for combat. Salina, Great Bend, Pratt, and Walker, Kansas became major modification centers for all B-29s. All production B-29s were flown to be upgraded and modified to the military requirements prior to delivery to the Army Air Corps. Overnight, Kansas was swarmed by tough colonels and GI mechanics flown in from all around the country. The Army needed 175 planes to be ready by April 15. Outside, under the brutal winter weather conditions of 1944, they were made ready, just meeting the deadline. At peak production, more than 4 completed B-29s rolled off the Wichita assembly line every day. When it was time for the production line to move, everything on the line was moved in 2 minutes. Boeing's Wichita employment grew to 30,000 employees. A high percentage of these workers were women who became known as Rosie the Riveter. Wichita's population grows by 40%, and temporary housing springs up, such as Hilltop Manor and Plainview. B-29s primarily served in the Pacific Theater.
Top gunner. I could fire every gun on the airplane from my position. They were coming right straight in. Didn't vary a bit. Then you could lock the sight on them and down they went.
The 21st Bomber Command, created for the Pacific Theater of Operations, was activated at Smoky Hill in Salina, Kansas on March 1, 1944. The first B-29s are flown to China soon after. All of the B-29s used on the first raid on Japan's homelands to the steel plant at Yawata on June 15, 1944, where Wichita built B-29s. Thousands more in the coming months will be flown to numerous airfields on Guam, Saipan, and Tinian in the Mariana Islands in the Pacific. 18 B-29s attacked Truk Island on October 27, 1944, beginning the bombing campaign from these islands. By the end of 1944, hundreds of aircraft will be departing of over 14 hours and 3,500 miles almost entirely over water. When the B-29's role of high-altitude bomber was changed to low-altitude night bomber, Curtis LeMay reportedly ordered the removal of most of the sighting and defensive equipment so it could carry more fuel and bombs.
22 out of my 35 missions are night single-ship missions. 5,000 to 10,000 feet in a big bomber like that, you're a big target. To Nagoya, Kobe, and Osaka, we burned 32 square miles of those cities in about 10 days. Most countries would have capitulated, but they didn't. So we burned 70 cities over there by war's end.
During World War II, B-29s dropped over 180,000 tons of bombs.
Jap Zero could fly faster than this airplane would fly, but it couldn't go at the altitude we could.
As many as 1,000 or more B-29s at a time bombed Tokyo, destroying large parts of the city.
Every mission, we were able to go over Tokyo or Nagasaki or any of those big cities and drop down, and you couldn't miss.
The most famous B-29s were the Silver Plate series, which were modified to drop atomic bombs. Finally, on August 6, 1945, the B-29 Enola Gay, piloted by Colonel Paul Tibbets, dropped the world's first atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan. On August 9th, a second B-29 boxcar, piloted by Major Charles Sweeney, dropped the second one on Nagasaki, Japan. With no surrender announcement forthcoming, more raids were scheduled for August 14 and 15. 1,014 B-29s were to target Japan. With a full bomb load of 20,500 pounds and flying mostly over water and bombing at night, using radar at 3,800 miles with 17-hour flight durations, this will be the longest mission of World War II. On the way back from the mission, they found out that Japan had agreed to surrender. The war was over. A total of 414 B-29s were lost during the war. During World War II, 4 B-29s made emergency landings in the Soviet Union after making bombing runs over Japan. The U.S. asked the Soviets to return them, but they refused. 3 of the B-29s were repaired and flown to the Tupolev Design Bureau in Moscow. The bombers were reverse engineered and turned into the Tu-4. 847 Tu-4s were produced. After the war, B-29s were adapted for several functions, including in-flight refueling, anti-submarine patrol, weather reconnaissance, and rescue duty. A revised version of the B-29 Superfortress became the B-50. It was fitted with Pratt & Whitney R-4360 Wasp Major engines and built between 1947 and 1953. The B-29 saw military service again in Korea between 1950 and 1953. Fighter jets, as well as the delivery of the much larger B-36 and the development of the Boeing B-47 Stratojet, followed by the Boeing B-52 Stratofortress, made the B-29 obsolete. The last B-29 squadron was retired from service in 1960. During its service life, even with all of its developmental problems, the B-29 is regarded as the military aircraft that played a key role bringing victory in World War II.